Welcome to episode 181 of the Forward from 50 podcast, where we interview people over 50 who are pursuing new direction for their lives. It's an opportunity for men and women to tell their stories, their way, and in their own words. I'm Greg Gerber, the founder of Forward from 50, and your host for today's show. Many people dream about reinventing themselves after turning 50, but few are willing to leave successful careers to start over in an entirely different direction. My guests today, Greg and Kiersten Harrod, did exactly that. Greg walked away from a successful engineering and manufacturing leadership career to become a business coach. On the other hand, Kiersten traded life as a homeschooling mother and medical coder to pursue a lifelong dream of raising sheep and creating fiber arts through their business, Pemberley Woolworks. Along the way, they discovered that their greatest mission wasn't simply raising sheep or teaching adults and children how to knit. It's helping people to slow down, reconnect with the real world, and rediscover the joy of learning something new. Here are a few key takeaways from this episode. First, it's never too late to pursue a dream, even if you have to start learning some completely different skills in your 50s. Second, slowing down, paying attention, and reconnecting with the world around you can transform your personal life and relationships. Finally, you'll hear why curiosity, courage, and a willingness to keep learning may be the keys to finding greater meaning and purpose in the second half of life. To tell us more about what gives our lives more meaning and purpose today, please welcome Greg and Kiersten Harrod to the show. Thanks for joining me today, Greg and Kiersten. I really appreciate the time. Tell us a little bit about yourselves and where you are in life.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, this is really a pleasure, Greg. We listened to your podcast and enjoy it very much. I'm Greg Harrod, and I am in my mid-50s, and we have had a career pivot. So I spent my career in manufacturing primarily. I started as an engineer and now do business coaching, but I've spent most of that time working for some big companies. But then just recently, Kiersten and I are pursuing different paths. As me as a full-time coach, but I think what your listeners will be most interested is in the other business that we have. We call Pemberley Woolworks. So, Kiersten, you want to talk about that?
I can. I'm also in my mid-50s and spent my earlier years as a full-time homeschooling mom, and then was a medical coder for a few years after I retired from that full-time job. And now we are, as Greg said, working with Pemberley Woolworks, which started when my firstborn son called me and said, "Mom, how would you like to start that sheep owning dream you've had for years and years?" And we said yes. So he had some land in the middle of nowhere, Illinois, and I've been a fiber artist for decades and had always had a dream of having some sheep so that I could use their wool to spin and knit and dye. He had some land and thought this would be a great opportunity to help Mom's dream come true. So we started with 4 sheep and he kept them for us. And when we made our career change, we moved to a small town in southeast Kansas, and there's a little bit of land. And now suddenly we have 21 sheep that we're taking care of and building a business around caring for them and all that goes around the life of caring for them and enjoying them.
That's neat. 21 sheep. Did you just see the movie that came out recently called Sheep Detective?
We did. We did. Yep.
That's fun. I've been around sheep a couple of times growing up in Wisconsin, and lambing season is always fun when those little ones arrive. But
not a lot of sleep for anyone involved, but it is sure exciting.
That's exactly right. In fact, one of my favorite videos of all time, I don't know if you've ever seen that, is about a sheep that got caught in a crevice, and a farmer pulled it out, and it jumped back in the crevice. And I thought, that's just like God. He's pulling me out of my trouble, and I want bounce right back into it.
Exactly.
Awesome. Yeah. So you were an engineer? What kind of things did you engineer?
Yeah, I had the privilege of doing some really fun stuff over the years, Greg. I worked for Caterpillar. So back when, if you've probably seen the heavy equipment alongside the road where there's GPS equipment that's guiding the operation of that equipment. So I had the privilege of being involved with that when it was just an idea. We were on the research team that put that into practice and did some patents around that. So that was a lot of fun. So I worked for Caterpillar for about 10 years, lived overseas for a little bit. And then I went to work for a company called York International, and then it became Johnson Controls. And we built HVAC products, air conditioners, furnaces, that sort of thing. So doing all kinds of design work as well as program management and business leadership. And it was so much fun because you can drive around town and see a piece of equipment that you helped design and actually made an impact on people's lives.
Are you still working now?
Working just for ourselves.
Wonderful.
I spent a couple of other companies after that and got some good experience, more in the leadership areas. And what I came to find out was really coaching is what I'm built to do. That's what I'm wired to do. So that's what I like to do now, and helping people build their businesses by developing their people.
Excellent. Kiersten, you were a homeschooled mom. How many kids did you have?
4.
Four.
4 from preschool up all the way through high school graduation.
That's fun.
So,
My youngest daughter
it
has
was
4 kids, and she wants to homeschool them as well, but they're just coming of school age. So she's got
yes,
a road ahead of her.
a long road. Yes. I love seeing all of the resources that are becoming available for homeschooling parents now. We spent some time at a homeschool convention just recently. One of the things that we did with Kimberly Woolworks was design a curriculum teaching fiber arts and making them accessible to people based on a co-op class that I taught when my children were in a homeschool co-op. And it was so exciting to see all of the different products and resources that are available now for homeschool families. I thought it was great.
Why don't you explain what fiber arts is?
Most people think of knitting when or crocheting right now is actually probably the most popular one. But it also includes weaving and spinning and dyeing yarn or fiber. Tatting was an older one that my great aunts would do, macrame, anything that involves fibers, wool fibers, alpaca fibers, cotton fibers, things like that. They're all included with fiber arts.
What's interesting is at these homeschool conventions, part of when we started this business, we initially thought it was going to be around knitting. Because Kiersten has done knitting and taught knitting for 30 plus years, sold patterns online and done all kinds of cool things, has videos on how to teach people to knit. And just like your grandma experienced, it's such a good way to reduce anxiety. You told that story in another episode, but that we thought it was going to go that direction. And then we were at these homeschool conventions, and Kiersten uses her spinning wheel and spins hand-spun yarn at the conventions, and we had videos of our sheep. And yes, people were interested in the curriculum. It's called beast2blanket.com and at Beast2Blanket, and it's on that website. And people were interested in it. And we talk about how to dye yarn with Kool-Aid, which people love. What they were really interested in was watching Kiersten spin.
That's why just a couple of weeks ago when I was up in Wisconsin, I took my oldest grandchildren to Old World, Wisconsin, and they had a display there where there was a woman spinning yarn, and the kids had to actually separate the wool as it was. They had picked up just little pieces of it. And I'm looking at that. We have no idea today the work that our ancestors did to make clothes. That is just incredible.
And that was the conversation that we kept having over and over again with people. They'd kind of stop and be mesmerized by the motion of the wheel. And then they would come closer and they say, "What are you doing?" It was an unrecognizable action. And then I'd start to explain what we were doing. And they'd say, "Is that from your sheep?" And I had intentionally chosen some bright colored wool that a friend of mine had dyed. And I said, "That's not from our sheep, but this is." And I would show them some wool that was just fresh off the sheep. And it's gross because sheep are out in the field and it's nasty. And they'd look at it and they'd, "Wow, that becomes this." And then we had videos of our sheep on our farm running in the background. And they'd say, "Those sheep?" And they're making these connections between, this is how it's done, really? And that was part of what was so inspiring to us, was to see not just little kids, but some adults making these connections between, wow, that's how it's done. And I'm so disconnected from this.
Exactly.
That awareness of, I thought shirts come from Amazon. completely different viewpoint, and to see people appreciating, wow, there's a lot that goes into this. And I'm kind of fascinated by the whole process. And there's a lot more going on than I'm aware of.
What?
And people would ask us, can we visit your farm?
Yeah.
And that's part of what's led to the things that we're doing now as we learn and pivoted our business and trying to find ways to share the wonderful experiences that God's blessed us with, the privilege of being able to experience, being able to share that somehow.
That is very cool. Why did you decide to use sheep wool instead of something like alpaca or woolly mammoth for that matter?
I think probably just because when I was a knitter, I started just knitting mostly. And I just loved merino wool because of how it felt and behaved when I knit. And so I think out of habit, when I dreamed about having my own little flock of sheep in my little cottage somewhere on a meadow, it was always merino sheep that I wanted to have. And so when my son found sheep, 3 of the 4 sheep were merino sheep. And so that's always been the part of the dream, what I wanted to do.
Greg, the other, we have 2 other breeds. One is Valais Black Nose. And what are they? They're called
They're kind of called the cutest sheep in the world. They're black and white, but they've got the black face and they've got little black patches on their knees and the little black heart shape on their bum. And most people have seen them. And then the other breed are called baby dolls, and they look like little teddy bears, and they're small. So they kind of look like these little teddy bears that are running around in the pasture. So we've got 3, I call them micro flocks because there's only 21, but we've got them separated into 3, and they're ridiculously cute. But there's a few merino, a few baby dolls, and a few of the Valais Black Nose. But we started with 3 merino.
And what Kiersten's done, she's a self-proclaimed literature geek. So Jane Austen is your favorite.
I do love Jane Austen, and we call the place Pemberley Farm, and every sheep has a Jane Austen name. So our rams are Mr. Darcy and Mr. Knightley and Mr. Bingley, and we have Jane and Emma and Lizzie, and everybody has an Austen name.
Oh, that's fun. Super. I suppose that people appreciate that even more when they understand the story behind the story.
They do. And I put out a newsletter every week and refer to them by name so the readers can keep track of them, and they all have their personalities. Georgiana is the boss ewe of our flock. And so people who read the newsletter regularly have come to know Georgiana and her antics. And it's a fun way to keep track of them as well as give the whole place a character.
I've asked a dumb question. How often can you shear the sheep?
That's not a dumb question at all because it's different for the different breeds. The Valais Black Nose are very shaggy. They have very full, thick, long staple is the length of the wool, and they have to be sheared twice a year. The merino and the baby dolls are once a year.
Okay. Is that done all at once? Is it like we wake up in the morning and it's like, today's the day?
Yeah, we don't do it.
Okay.
We had the privilege of having an amazing team come and do our shearing this last May. And the team was a woman who owns her own farm and her daughter, who is 11 years old. And she handled those 160-pound rams like they were nothing. And they were fantastic. It was wonderful to watch them work together. And they both impressed us with how good they were and with how, if we ever wanted to attempt that on our own, we have an awful lot to learn and a lot of bodybuilding to do. So we do not have currently the strength and agility to manage the sheep quite like they do to be able to position them where they need to do the shearing.
I would be intimidated to be outdone by an 11-year-old girl. That's for sure.
She was fantastic. She was wonderful.
That's neat.
And Greg, it's interesting because when you think about listeners hearing the story and thinking, wow, I would like to have sheep someday, but I could never do that. And it's an interesting situation that we found ourselves in because, again, this isn't an easy business. I know a lot of your listeners have come out of the business world or still in their businesses or taken a side business to full-time. So part of what we're doing, and we could talk about it if you like, but that idea of we're not a high volume wool processor, and we're not just raising sheep to sell. We're doing that, but we're also a digital content business in some ways, because we found that, as Kiersten said, people like to read her newsletter, and we are able to share those stories. And when you connect it back to the Jane Austen literature, there's an entire business model around that too. That because not everyone has the luxury of funding that kind of business just out of their extra cash. We're trying to make it a profitable business that sustains itself. And there's a lot to it. So that's an exciting thing that we're doing in our shift of career. We're learning marketing, and we're learning, like you're doing, with editing and all the things involved with writing articles. So all kinds of skills that we are now at a beginning of a whole new career in our businesses in so many ways that I know your listeners may think we've done it forever and we know all about this. We don't. We're learning, and we're learning it in our 50s.
Including the sheep care, because neither of us have an agricultural background, and we're learning all of it from zero. It's a lot to learn, but it can be done, and it's fun.
I think it's encouraging that you started it with 4 sheep, because that is manageable for many people to have. If you have a lot of property, they require a lot of care.
I was told that sheep are two things. First, I was told that sheep are the easiest livestock to manage because they don't tend to want to try to escape, and they basically can subsist on grass. So that was one thing I was told. The other thing I've been told since getting sheep was that sheep are animals that are looking for a way to die, which goes back to the video that you were talking about with the sheep jumping into the crevice. So we do take a lot of care, but I think they are a great animal to start learning about livestock with. They do take care, and we're learning, it seems every day, a new lesson about, oh, we need to take this into account, and oh, we really need to add this to the regimen, and oh, okay, we need to do this as well. There's always more to learn, but I enjoy learning, and so it's a great way to keep doing that.
Once you shear the sheep, you've got all of this wool that's unprocessed. Do you then
Correct.
process it into actual yarn?
We can, and I have done a very little bit of one part of the process and a whole lot of the other part of the process. So after this shearing was the first time that I did the cleaning and carding, the combing of part of the wool myself. From carded or combed wool to spinning, dyeing, and producing. I've done that part of it a lot, but this was the first time I did the cleaning and the combing myself. And I enjoyed learning how to do it. And I was very happy to find that we have a local mill that will do that for us, not too far away, because boy, it is an labor intensive, messy process, because there's a whole bunch of lanolin and gunk in the wool that you just have to work through, and finding the right level of how much to leave in so the wool stays soft and workable, but not sticky and gross. It's tricky. And I'm very eager to, now that I've experienced it, let somebody else manage that part of it.
So you still dye the wool yourself?
I can,
Oh, you
yes.
can.
I really love the natural color of it. But I've done a dyeing in the past and have sold dyed wool on Etsy before and in other markets. But I really am enjoying the natural colors of these sheep that we're owning, and probably will just enjoy that for a time.
And Greg, I mentioned it earlier, but it's one of the things that we find people love, and whether it's doing it yourself or with grandkids or whatever, is dyeing wool yarn with Kool-Aid. It makes beautiful yarn. It's amazing. And there's a free lesson on how to do that we make available, and it's at dyeasheep.com, 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 where you can download it and do that. And that's a lot of fun. We've done that, and it's just, people say, you're kidding? That's beautiful. That's with Kool-Aid? It's like, yes.
That was part of the co-op class that I taught when my kids were young, for the Beast to Blanket class. And the kids love that because it's just And it's a really simple chemistry lesson about protein fibers and acidic environment and chemical bond. So you get a little science in there as well. But yeah, it's just a really fun thing.
That's neat. And to use Kool-Aid, who knew?
Yes.
It's almost like
Who knew?
dyeing Easter eggs, but using wool this time, huh?
It's exactly the same chemical process because of the protein bond in the eggshell and then the wool. Yep.
We should note that behind you, the people who are watching a video will see it, but on audio, they will not. There's this giant, I guess, what do we call it? Fiber
A
art.
blanket.
Fiber art blanket that you have made that's full of wool. Did you dye all of the different colors that are in there too?
I did not.
Okay.
That's a commercially dyed yarn there and some natural yarn. But yeah, it was a pleasure to knit it.
So your curriculum, Beast to Blanket, I like that
Yes.
name because it
Thank
shows
you.
kids that the clothing comes from somewhere, that it has to come from an actual animal, not a factory. And is this a homeschool thing that you sell to homeschoolers or school districts?
We sell it to anybody, but it was originally designed for that homeschool co-op class. And it was a series of just 10 lessons we met once a week. So it was meant to make it very accessible. So anybody can do any of these things. And it was a survey of all the fiber arts that I could cram into those 10 weeks. So I taught them how to spin, how to dye, how to weave, how to knit. And then we built all the tools that we needed in the class too. So they made their own knitting needles and they made their own drop spindle to do the spinning. So it was a great kind of self-reliance class as well, because they got to make their tools and then they got to use the tools to do the fiber art as well. So it was a great class. And then I taught it again later, and we decided the second time that I taught it to formalize it into a curriculum that I could share with other people.
Do people need to buy a
And
sheet?
Greg's,
You don't have to buy a sheet. I made a whole bunch of links to make it easier because I was a homeschool mom. And the hardest part when I was a homeschool mom was, now where do I find all the stuff that I need for all of this? So I thought, okay, how can I make this easy? So I made a big old list with links to everything to make it as easy as I could for homeschool moms.
and part of that redirection, we try something and see what works and what people like. Some of the stories that came out of the students and their parents, you could pick one, Kiersten, your favorite. There's so many, but I think the story of how the mom and the son.
Oh, it was great. One of the things I was surprised about when I taught that class was how many boys took to it, because I was a little bit afraid that knitting has become, or fiber arts, it's perceived to be a girl's thing. Crafts can be perceived as a girl's thing. And oddly, both of the classes that I taught were much more boy heavy than girl heavy. And so I kind of wondered, are they going to like this? Is it going to be something they enjoy? But surprisingly, the boys really took to it, especially the tool building part. But some of the boys in each class, there were one or two boys that really just, I think, developmentally where they were struggling with some emotional regulation. And they went through this emotional journey that was just beautiful to watch. And I think it was part of maybe some of what we see with mental health and crafting, knitting, the same kind of principles applying. They would get very frustrated to the point almost of tears sometimes, anger, and then they would persevere. They would slow down. They would persevere. They would work through whatever the process was that they were doing. And then they would come out the other side having accomplished something. They achieved it. They found their own success with just a little bit of guidance. And often it was fellow students coming and encouraging them, saying, you can do this. You've got this. We did it. You'll get it. And they'd get the other side of it. And they would be so proud of what they had accomplished. And we had a family night, showcase night at the end of the semester. And those were the kids that were most proud at dragging their family and their friends over to point at, I did that. That was mine. I made this. Look what I did. And one of those kids, I heard from his mother that he was struggling with the concept of knitting, which is one of the more difficult skills for kids, especially boys who haven't quite developed the fine motor skills at that point. But she and her son got the videos that I had made, and they sat down. They decided they were going to work on it together, and they did. And they memorized the little poem that I had included, and they were working on it together, and they decided they were going to conquer it. She told me that was one of the best bonding times that she had with this particular son. They both mastered it. They both conquered it. And I thought, that's just beautiful. That's so rewarding to know that I was able to help with providing that for them.
What I most about that story is there are no screens. So the kids have to put down the screens, do something with their hands, learn a new skill, and then they have some beautiful thing to use afterwards that they can point to, like you said, and say, I did that. I love that. We need more of that.
And I agree. And what I loved most was they didn't care that it wasn't perfect either. And I think that's so important with this kind of skill too. When we're trying these new things, no matter what they are, we don't need to be perfect. We just need to try and embrace that the imperfection is part of the process, no matter what the endeavor is. So when those kids, part of the end project was we make a class blanket. Every student knits a square, and then I incorporate it into a class blanket. And so at showcase night, there's a blanket on display. And so the kids are going up and saying, that's my square, that's my square. And if you're looking as a harsh critic, they're a mess. There's holes, it's disaster. These kids are looking at this tangible marker of what they have accomplished together as a corporate group, and they see beauty. And you have to. And they're so proud. They're like, that's my square. They don't see the flaws. They don't see any of that. They're like, look what I learned. Look what I did. And it's a beautiful moment.
If someone wanted to get into this and they wanted to get a spinning wheel and start doing their own kind of thing from scratch, is it possible for people to buy the raw wool? And where would they get that kind of thing?
Oh, sure. We got that question a lot with the Beast Blanket at the conventions. And like I said, try to make it easy for anybody. So we do that through the Beast Blanket curriculum. There's links to source everything. But it is easy. You can find online all kinds of places where you can buy spinning wheels, raw wool, all of that. But you don't even need to go I guess spinning wheel is an investment. But you can make a drop spindle, which is what we did in the class, which is how it was done before spinning wheels weren't invented until the 1600s. So before that, people used drop spindles, which are very simple tools to make and learn how to do the simple mechanics of it.
That's excellent. I love that.
And Greg, one of the things we found too is people can sometimes just take a step backward in the process. And by that, I mean, we talked about the dyeing the yarn with Kool-Aid. We asked the question a lot of folks who would walk up and say, do you crochet or knit? Oh, I crochet. And I would just ask the follow-up question, have you ever dyed your own yarn? And they said, no, could I do that? And then we were able to introduce them into that one step back of, you sure can. Just get some wool yarn, get some Kool-Aid. Here's your free lesson on how to do that. And they're like, oh, wow. So they started where they were with crocheting, and they loved that. And they just took a step back to dye their wool themselves. So they don't have to do the whole thing even. They can just do part of it and still get that experience of being closer to the front end of the process.
Which is a really great way to look about reconnecting. And I think that's a very organic way that I came to it too, because I started as a knitter. And I thought, this is great, and I love this yarn, but I sure would like a different color. So I learned how to dye so I could get the colors that I wanted. Exactly. And I thought,
the color.
This is beautiful. And I wonder what it would be like to spin my own yarn. So I learned how to spin. So it's that curiosity can lead you to reconnecting. And if you're already in something that drives that curiosity to reconnect back, that's awesome. Sometimes people need a little bit of help to find the thing that helps them reconnect. And that's part of what we're trying to provide as well.
But be careful, because now we've taken that all the way back to we have 21 sheep.
I know.
Exactly.
It can lead you to dangerous places where suddenly you're running to the sheep barn at 6:00 in the morning because somebody's lambing suddenly.
Greg, do you use your business skills to help run the business?
We do. I do. One of the things that we apply every day is one of the things I do with clients and I love to do is to help understand how each person is wired on a team, what we're built to do, the kind of work that brings us energy, the kind of work that drains us. And Kiersten and I have done that exercise together. So we know each other at a deeper level. So we are effectively a two-person team. So there are times where we recognize that it's time for me to use my discernment and Kiersten to use her wonder to think about what problem we're really trying to solve. And often it creates friction like it does in any business until you know how work flows in any business, including sheep or a digital product business or running a podcast or running a major manufacturing company. A team that is if each person is more self-aware, and then you're aware of one another, and then you have the language to be able to talk about that openly with humility and without guilt and judgment. So that's what I love doing with my clients. We do it every day as a couple. Any married couple needs that, but also as a married couple running multiple businesses.
That's interesting that you said that, because I think it's an essential business skill for a leader to identify so that they can look to make sure they have the right people in the right seats on the bus. And sometimes they're left with their heads scratching. This guy was so good in the interview, but he's failing so badly here in the job. He's just in the wrong part of the job. Move him to a different position with a different responsibilities, and this guy could very well thrive. And so do you help business leaders and coaches identify or develop those skills?
Yeah, that's exactly what we do, is to work with individual leaders and then their teams to help them understand exactly that, to have an assessment of what problem are we really, with what's really going on under the surface. Because often what it feels like is work keeps coming back to the leader, and I help them learn how to give that work, reassign it strategically so they can stop everything coming back to them and stop doing work that their team's ready to own. And that develops their people. They have a more successful business. And that gives me a lot. That's what energizes me. That's what I'm built to do. So I get to do that in the process of helping leaders they get the benefit of reclaiming their time. But more importantly, they're avoiding that burnout that often happens when you're doing something that you can do, but it's not really what energizes you. And most people don't even know what that is.
I like that your website says that you help business leaders stop becoming daily firefighters and become a more calm and confident leader. And I think that helps them in their job satisfaction as well, right? To be able to train the other people to take over the job so they're not having to do it all.
And Greg, as your listeners, we are members of your listeners. And so many of my peers are reaching the point at which we're much closer to stepping out of our role, and in a particular, if we're in corporate, for example, and training up those teams to carry on what we do. So many people, they miss that. And there's a transfer of knowledge that just walks out the door. But what I found is the best leaders are those that start planning early how to develop their people, how to step into a role of supporting others and strengthening them so they can thrive and flourish. And the earlier you start that, you don't have to wait till your mid-50s or 50 plus to do that. If you're doing that at the very beginning, then you've got a really strong organization, and it frees you up not just to someday retire or to move to a different type of business, but to take a vacation day.
Wouldn't that be nice without having a whole stack of stuff accumulate and waiting when you come back? Yeah. So do you teach or coach business leaders on clarity? Is that the kind of thing that you're trying to do as well?
That clarity always comes down to it. It always comes down to clarity. And that's both in understanding as well as communication. Because most times we'll find folks are stuck and they can't quite put their finger on what's going on. And you've probably heard the phrase that you can't read the label when you're inside the bottle. And that's really true. That when I come in from the outside and just help them, and you could call it consulting, you can call it coaching. I prefer coaching because I really do try to help draw out what is already inside of a leader. With some key questioning, I'm just guiding them through to be more successful. And they get that clarity I have an assessment called the Leadership Clarity Scorecard. And that helps people take a short 5 to 7 minutes and they realize where their organization is in good shape and where they're probably not doing too well. But that in itself brings some clarity that folks tell me. It's like just going through that, I realize things that I didn't even take time to think about. And so that's where our businesses come together, that when you think about the value of slowing down and pausing and thinking and being intentional, both in our Pemberley Woolworks business as well as my coaching business, there's tremendous value in that.
Yep, the slowing down, that is so important because we are moving at what we don't even think it could possibly become faster. And then 2 years later, we are doubling our productivity and we are just running all the time. Our bodies, but our souls as well, and our businesses to be moving in that quickly in that direction without having any direction or clarity on where we're going, etc. And like you do, Kiersten, helping people to slow down their daily activities because it takes a while to form this kind of fiber art, to create the yarn itself and then to actually stitch it together into something that can be enjoyed.
Yes.
And one of the skills that we find both with, if it's the kiddos doing in the curriculum through the Beast of Blanket curriculum, or whether it's my coaching with high level, at any level, executive leaders at the highest level even, it's the noticing and the observing that is a skill that is sometimes missed. Because as you said, Greg, we were just moving so fast and there's such a pressure to act and do. But Kiersten, I'd love for you to share a little more about that idea of noticing and observing is something you're really good at, and you help other people do that as well.
One of the things that I love about Pemberley Farm is that every sheep has a name. And we don't do that just for records, but it is to help us notice how they don't all act the same, different. And it takes time to get to know your sheep. And we notice that Lucy tends to graze by herself a little bit. And we notice that another one may be quicker to the feed bucket and pushes everybody out of the way. And you don't learn these things, which may have implications on the sheep later when you notice they're acting differently. Something might be wrong, unless you spend time and you slow down and you watch them instead of just dumping the feed and walking away. And that kind of habit translates so well to all areas of our lives. We need to pay attention to the people that are around us. We need to pay attention to the things that are happening around us. Are the people that we are caring for, are they acting differently today than they were yesterday? Am I noticing the condition of things around me? Yeah. And it was a lesson that I learned as a very young child in an elementary school lesson. We had a field day. It's a great experience for me, very foundational. Our teachers took us out in the middle of the country and turned us loose, I think 6th grade, told us to get lost in the field. I don't think you can get away with doing this today, but they said, you need to just pay attention, get where you can't see anybody and listen to what your senses, listen, look, we'll call you back and tell us what you've noticed. We did that. So bored, didn't notice anything. And then finally you do. You start thinking, oh, I'm hearing some things. I'm seeing some things. I'm actually smelling things. Huh, that's interesting. We went back, didn't think much about it. Next day we went out, same thing. They said, your list can't be the same. Go do it again. And you really had to focus and think, okay, I heard that yesterday. What else? It was a very foundational experience for me. And so I've taken that with me and I'm finding it now to be something that's coming back very strongly. We go down to the barn and I love to just go down there and sit and listen and look and watch, see what they're doing, what the sheep are doing, what the chickens are doing, what's going on in the trees. Oh, that's changed. This is different. The smell's different. The season is changing. You can feel it in the air. These are all things that if you're rushing around, you miss, and you miss so much. And I feel very blessed to be in a situation where I have the luxury of experiencing it, because not everybody can do that. So I think that's the biggest motivation behind some of what we're doing with trying to encourage people to reconnect to the real world and taking moments, even if it's just 5 minutes here or there, to reconnect where they are. You don't have to go to the country. You don't have to go to a park or a beach or someplace special. You can do it right where you are to reconnect to what's around you, to the real world.
My church has this thing where they encourage its members to take notice and take interest. So you just don't go through life, but you're looking and you're noticing people and things around you and taking an interest in them. And that does require you to slow down. And I've interviewed several people who have gone on these silent retreats where they have gotten to nature and they are bored out of their minds for the first couple of hours. And then all of a sudden they start to take notice and take interest. And it is amazing what you can hear and see if you're starting to pay attention.
I love that phrase, that take notice and take interest. That's great. Yeah.
I also like that you name your sheep, because the shepherds really do get to know their sheep. At least they did in the olden days when they were out with the sheep out in the fields with them 24 hours a day, etc. And it's funny, I have watched a video recently of a shepherd or a flock of sheep that were out there, and they were bringing strangers in to call the sheep toward them. And try as they might, the sheep could care less. And all of a sudden the shepherd steps up and just says a couple of words, and all of a sudden they all start running to him. They just, because they know their sheep that way. And that's the way we are with employees, is if we know them the way that we should, then they know that we care and they come willing to follow us. Same with children. It just works all the way around. I love that.
Yes, I do too.
I understand you sell knitting patterns as well.
I do. I did. I haven't written many recently, but probably the most recent one was a sock pattern the easiest sock pattern to try to encourage people who are intimidated by knitting socks, because that seems to be a big hurdle for people who like to knit, but that seems to be a scary thing. I wrote it, described it as having way too much instruction for an experienced knitter, so that it would enable people to be able to conquer that mountain. But yeah, I like knitting socks. So I've knitted some sock patterns and some shawl patterns.
That's wonderful. It's nice to have a place to start. If you could roll the clock back, is there anything you do differently?
So I'm going to jump in, because back to, if we talk about that, and it's the tool that we use is called the Working Genius, 6 Types of Working Genius by Pat Lencioni. So one of the things that we've learned, so some people are those who process and think at a deeper level, but more slowly. When I think about, could we do something differently, Greg? So from our worldview, from a Christian perspective, we trust that God's plans are perfect. And I think sometimes, boy, I sure wish I would have done that differently, or I should have done something differently because I was in error. But then if I think about how he's redeemed even those areas that I goofed and things that were frankly extremely painful and difficult, the outcome, knowing that he's in control and he's bringing about his perfect purposes, I wouldn't change a thing.
That's neat. I like that. Absolutely. Do you have any advice for people who are struggling with what to do to give their lives more meaning and purpose?
I would pause for just a moment. Kiersten, on that previous question, is there anything that you would like to add now that you've had a little time to close up?
I was thinking, as you were talking, I was thinking, thank you. Yes, that's what I'm on. I was trying to condense it all.
So, Greg, if you would please just repeat that question, make sure we get it right.
Do you have any advice you would give to people over 50 who are struggling with what to do to give their lives more meaning and purpose?
I would encourage them to be courageous about exploring, to be curious about what's out there that they haven't tried that they might want to learn about, to embrace the idea about being a learner. Again, I think there's a temptation to think that learning is done in the first part of life. And I know that I'm biased because I love learning and I've always have. School is my favorite thing in the world. But there's so much to learn, and we're finding ourselves in a steep learning curve, and I'm enjoying it so much. But I have a huge list of things that I still want to learn how to do and learn more about. And it seems like there's an infinite number of things out there to learn more about. And you just never know what's going to spark passion.
The happiest people seem to be the ones who want to learn or enjoy learning and are always trying to learn something new.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about you?
Do you have any advice?
Yeah, I would add to that just a bit of urgency around it. So in our longer story of our lives, for Kiersten and I, there have been things that didn't go the way we thought they would. And as we get to the phase of life where, in particular, we've had a lot of folks around us who are no longer alive. And we think that we know how our plans are going to go, but we have learned in this latest phase of life, as Kiersten said, to be more courageous and to recognize that we aren't guaranteed tomorrow or next year. So what are the small steps we can do, not recklessly, but what could we, and again, from our worldview, trust God more with and not be quite so afraid? Because what's the worst that can happen? And thinking through it that way. So we've started trying to take these smaller steps and recognizing, okay, if this doesn't work, we can do something different. If we have to sell all the sheep, we can still sell the sheep, but we've got that experience and we've tried. And just recognizing that brevity of life, that I'm sure a lot of folks who are listening are having the same experience we do, that you recognize you're not indestructible and our days are short. So making the most of them, learning, trying something, and just being a little more courageous. And that's something I'm learning. I'm not always that good at. I'm a little risk averse as an engineer.
That's great advice. Thank you very much for sharing that. I understand you've developed some email invitations that will help people. Tell us about that.
Yes, we have a small series of email invitations to help people reconnect to the real world just right where they are. And so they come out every other day for a short series that help you focus just where you are for a short amount of time. And we think they're helpful to explore different ways of noticing and paying attention and developing that habit.
Is this something that people would buy from you?
The email series is free. And then there's a further way that we are developing and have for offer now that is Pemberley correspondence. That is a snail mail version of that we're actually emailing a letter from me from the farm monthly with a few little things in it from the farm and a deeper invitation to practice that noticing as well. But you can connect all of that from Real World Connect at Real World Reconnect.com.
It seems that these days we open our mailbox and we, at this current phase, we have election mailings and we have bills and we have junk mail. And it's so nice when you get something that is meaningful. We have a friend who has a business that's similar, and she sent us just a real thinking of you this summer. She has chickens and their own Instagram channel. It's amazing. Danielle Bornowski, she's down in Texas and she's doing a fantastic job with that. She's just sent us a few things in the mail. And we want to do that as well as one of our paid offerings. But as Kiersten said, that getting started with noticing and observing and slowing down, that's something that we just want to help people as a gift. And as Kiersten said, you can go to realworldreconnect.com, just 3 words, realworldreconnect.com. And that will get you in contact with us and hopefully help people start right where they are. They don't have to buy sheep. They don't have to do all these things that we've talked about, but they can get started there.
Can they connect to the farm from there as well and to your coaching services, or are those different things?
We handle that, right?
Sure. So that's the best way to connect with us so that they can learn more. And that puts them in direct contact with us via email. And so with regards to the coaching services, that's a little bit different path. There is a scorecard that I mentioned. If they're interested in that, it's at leadershipclarityscorecard.com. And that would help folks who take that first step with their business or even in life. But it's at leadership, again, 3 words, leadershipclarityscorecard.com on the business side. But definitely the real world reconnect for the folks who are wanting to know more about the farm and the slowing down and all the things we talked about.
Are you active on Facebook or any other social media?
I'm easy to find on LinkedIn, but again, those websites are the best place to get started.
Thank you very much for sharing your story with me today. I really appreciated it. We covered a lot of topics, and I just love what you're doing to help people slow down and reconnect. And I wish you the best of luck going forward.
Thank you. And thank you for having us.
Yeah, Greg, I know that as a podcast host, it is not easy. And you're actually living out what you talk about by giving back and having meaning and helping other people tell their stories. So we very much appreciate what you're doing, Greg.
Thank you so much. Greg and Kiersten Harrod remind us that meaning and purpose aren't found by standing still. They're discovered by remaining curious, embracing new challenges, and paying closer attention to the world around us. For Greg, purpose comes from helping business leaders to gain clarity, develop their teams, and build healthier organizations that do not depend entirely on one person. For Kiersten, meaning comes from teaching others to reconnect with traditional skills, appreciate the beauty of creating something with their own hands, and rediscover the value of slowing down enough to truly notice the people and world around them. Their advice is to keep learning and be courageous enough to try something new. Don't let fear keep you from pursuing a dream, because none of us are promised tomorrow. Sometimes the smallest step towards something new can completely change the direction of your life. If you would like to learn more about Greg and Kiersten's work helping people to reconnect with the real world, visit realworldconnect.com. You can also explore Greg's leadership coaching resources at leadershipclarityscorecard.com and connect with Greg on LinkedIn. That's all for this week's show. If you'd like to start living a more meaningful life, I encourage you to download our free guide to finding purpose, which is available at www.forwardfrom50.com. I'll have another inspirational interview on the next episode of the Forward from 50 podcast. Thanks for listening, and if you like this show, please consider leaving a review wherever you download the episodes.